Hello, everyone, and welcome to our podcast. I'm Dani, and today Great.com talks with Sabrina Skanga, who works as Program Director at the Eating Disorder Foundation. Now, if you haven't heard of them yet, the EDF works in the prevention of eating disorders through education, support, and advocacy. Before we begin, as I always say, if you're new here, remember to press subscribe on YouTube or in your podcast app. Now, back to you. Hi, Sabrina. Welcome to our podcast.
Hi, Danielle. Thank you so much for inviting us.
It's truly our pleasure. And I like to highlight those things every time that I have a guest here that talks about a subject that speaks to me personally, which is the case. I don't think I've had a long story to tell here, but I have struggled in the past with eating disorder, and I know how complicated it can be to not just recover from the situation, but just giving the first step, taking the first step towards help. And this is why I believe that organizations like yours are so vital. So let's begin by understanding, how did you got in touch and start working at EDF?
Well, thank you for sharing your connection as well. I think there are so many people able to relate and understand, because we all have a body and we all have a relationship with our body. And I got into my work at the Eating Disorder Foundation as an undergraduate student. I did my internship here, and I had always been working towards some way of working in the mental health field. Eating disorders also run in my family as well, so it's a very close subject to my heart as well. And I've been lucky to, as an undergraduate intern, just to get hired after, and I've been here at the foundation in Denver, Colorado, for about 5 years now.
Wow, that's wonderful. It's so great when people had a chance to, so early in their life, let's say, I think as an undergrad, it's pretty early, to get in touch with such meaningful work. It really shapes a different path in your life. There is no way to get in touch with it and just forget about it later. And how did the organization begin, truly?
Yeah. So our founder, her name is Toni Saber, and we're lucky enough to still have her very involved. She is one of our support group facilitators. Toni started a support group in 2003 after, as an adult, she struggled with an eating disorder and went through a pretty extensive treatment program. And after she came out, noticed that her friends and family didn't have the language or the experience to support her. They were unsure as to, they loved her and they wanted to be there for her, but they were unsure as to how exactly to do that. So Toni started a group for family members and friends. And that was how our foundation really began. Fast forward almost 20 years, we have over 23 support groups. We still focus a lot on supporting family members, caregivers, and friends who are witnessing a loved one that's struggling with that relationship with their body, and kind of just bring more education and awareness and support as to how to support other people. And then we also have a lot of individual support groups. So we did begin in Denver, in Colorado in the United States. And one of the things that happened through the pandemic over the last couple of years has allowed us to expand our services from just supporting our Denver community to making everything available online. So our services at this point are available for people all over the world.
Wow, that's a great story. And I've got to say that I'm relieved to know that solutions and other kinds of solutions came from these times of, I would say desperation was just insane. So it's really good to hear those things. And I love some of the points that you mentioned in this answer. I'm going to pick some things out to use as we go now. But let's begin with some context understand a little bit of what are exactly eating disorders, what qualifies in that, and how common are they in the United States right now?
Yeah, good question. In the United States, what research shows us is about 30 million female identified individuals and 10 million male identified individuals. Um, this data it's over a decade old, so I think we all can estimate that that number is likely higher, because it also doesn't include, this particular research doesn't include people who are gender nonconforming or identify as different than just female or male. And it also doesn't really grasp the various ages of people who struggle with eating disorders. So there's a lot more work to be done, and some of it is happening now for research that highlights different populations. And so what we do know worldwide is about 70 million people are impacted by eating disorders. And to describe a little bit for your question, what is an eating disorder? The way I like to describe it is the development of an unhealthy preoccupation with a few things. It can be about food, it can be about appearance, it can be about weight. And these specific items interfere with someone's daily life so much that it interferes with their mental capacity and their physical health. So it really gets in the way of relationships. It can really harm somebody's physical being. And as far as getting a diagnosis, I know that this is probably really different in particular different countries, as we all address mental health and kind of define those things in different language. So one of the things that is important that we like to share at EDF is that no one needs to have a diagnosis to be deserving of getting help and support. If you're struggling with your body, if you're struggling nourishing yourself, and you know it's getting in the way of, living the best version of your life, then that's worth reaching out and getting connected and talking with someone.
Wow, I think that's paramount. I love that you said that, because sometimes, and that was frankly my case, that it took me longer to reach out for help because I felt like I need someone to diagnose me with this and then seek out to people to help. And I couldn't really understand that I was already in trouble. And it takes time. And with that, and moving back to what you mentioned before about supporting the caretakers and the people that have loved ones in this situation, what is exactly the work that you are doing right now? What is the help that you provide to help in these situations?
So our staff, we're a fairly small nonprofit. There are 4 of us on staff, and what we do is develop and provide programs under education. So providing education to any really community that wants to learn a little bit more. So sometimes we'll talk directly with students who are in a school system that might be as far as elementary school all the way up to university levels. We'll do some support groups. So that's a big pillar of our work, is providing support group spaces that are free and accessible. We try to clarify that we're not a clinical service. So what we provide is not a replacement for someone getting professional help, but we do want to extend and build that community piece. So no matter where someone's living. So really connecting people, because this can be a very isolating mental illness. And there's so much stigma still, I think, around what is it to have an eating disorder, or what is it to struggle with body image. so having support groups and a lot of different specific natures, such as different identities that people carry. So for instance, we do have a support group for men. We have a LGBTQ plus and queer community support groups for trans and non-binary folks. We have support groups for adolescent ages and those over 50. So we're trying to continuously expand and develop those groups that the community is asking of us, so that they can, really find and connect and see that others, that they're not alone, and that there's many of us who are struggling with these aspects of our lives. So we have education, our support, and then another program that has grown a lot over the last few years is our mentorship program. So we will pair individuals and caregivers with someone who has had a little more experience already. That might be in recovery themselves from an eating disorder or disordered eating, or a caregiver of someone who has been supporting their loved one for a few years. So those are the services that we provide directly, that are continuing to expand.
Oh, that's credible, and honestly, it's vital work, I would say, because as I think when you said to me that, oh, we have this data about how many people in the States have eating disorder, but it's 10 years old. One of the things that makes me think it's okay, it's still a stigma. People still don't know how important it is to investigate it, to treat it, to take it seriously, because there is a lot of misconceptions and prejudice around this. So I think one of the greatest ways to start raising awareness is actually helping those that are around people that are facing this issue. So again, it's vital. It's fully necessary. And I loved when you highlight that you don't, the services that you provide do not play as a specialist or like a shrink or medical assistance. You are supporting them, and this is also important to pay attention to. And well, I'm just really happy about what you're doing right now. I could keep going talking how much I loved it, but I don't want to take time from you speaking more. Now, I'm just going to make a quick detour because I think you're probably going to mention things before, or actually after, to talk about your website and tell people to go there. It's eatingdisorderfoundation.org. And for everyone listening or watching on YouTube, you can find much more information than we've given here about eating disorders. And you can find different resources, which is quite impressive, actually. And you can find how to get these helps from support groups and how many groups there are. You can learn more about them. So if you have time and if you're touched by this interview, just go at eatingdisorderfoundation.org. And in that point, if I know or I am in this situation of being in or having an eating disorder, how do we reach out to get help from you?
The best way, we try to make it as easy and accessible as possible. Because we're not a clinical service, we don't require much information. So on the website is the best way to either sign up for our support group or sign up for our newsletter. And you can email one of our staff members. Our emails are all available also on the website, and really ask us any question. And if we don't have the direct answer, we're going to do our best to give you a referral or a resource to someone or some organization out there that can help. So we really want everybody to just reach out, and you can ask. This can be the very first time you're asking a question, or it can be the 100th time. We know that sometimes this can take so much energy, but we are here to support anyone at any stage of their journey.
Yeah, well, that's wonderful. And just a question that occurred to me right now, because you mentioned about a specific group for the queer community, right?
Yes.
And that makes me wonder if there is like maybe not an exclusivity, because I don't think there is, but what are the connections that you have been seeing in your work with the LGBTQ plus community and eating disorders?
There is a high prevalence of the queer community that struggles with eating disorders and body image concerns or body dysmorphia, which is a separate diagnosis we share and talk about that isn't an eating disorder itself, but really highlights the connection. So I think one of the biggest things that we're understanding in the eating disorder community is that these coping mechanisms are so connected with who we are as a person and what identities we carry. So when we're discussing what recovery looks like and how do we change, these very important coping skills that we may have developed, we also have to include the pieces of who we are and our identity and how we can feel safe inside the bodies that we have, which for some people, especially in either the trans or intersex non-conforming gender identities, there can be an additional layer of exploration or even sometimes discomfort. So we have to include those things in the conversation of eating disorder recovery. I think that, to expand on your question, all types of marginalized communities, I think, are less likely to want to reach out for help. Unfortunately, because of a lot of the stigma that still exists and the lack of education in the professional world and education of professionals. So I think that there's a safety kind of hesitancy sometimes for those communities, because they're not quite sure if they're going to find a provider who is understanding and trusting that they know themselves best still. So there's a lot of actually amazing organizations popping up that focus on the queer and trans intersex communities, that are doing research and connecting professionals who work with those communities. So that's another area that we also have a lot of workshops for, and also just want to connect people to either our support groups or other organizations who are focusing on different marginalized communities as well.
Wow, got it. And thank you for this fire question. And now, just maybe a guess, who knows? What is your vision for the future, maybe to 5-10 years? Where do you see the organization going?
What a beautiful question, to be creative and think of the future. We have grown so much over the last 2 years. I think that what we hope for, now that we know we can continue to reach people in the virtual space, is to continue expanding the groups that we provide and we offer, and continuing to find volunteers to help run and facilitate our support groups, and our programming. I think that the goal in the future is for all of us to work so hard, work ourselves out of our jobs, so that people can feel really, really able and free to be in their bodies. So I think what every nonprofit hopes for, which is to continue growing and helping and impacting more and more people.
Oh, that's a wonderful vision, actually. And how can we help you get there? What is the best way to help you keep going?
There's many ways. Most of our organization is, our programs are run by volunteers. So we're always looking for volunteers, and finding new ways to have volunteers in a virtual space. If there are any mental health professionals who are willing to volunteer and lead support groups, that's one of the greatest ways we can grow. or our mentorship program if you have some experience and are in stable recovery. And I think and lastly, just being one of our core values is that all of our services are free and accessible. Is that if you have the means to donate to support our programs, that's always welcomed and appreciated, because that is how we can continue to providing services at no cost.
That's wonderful. Thank you for sharing all of these possibilities. And I truly hope that someone is listening to us right now when we'll get in touch and volunteer or donate. Please, guys, go to the website and learn more about this. Thank you so much, Sabrina, for talking to us today. This was a great talk.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
And for everybody listening also, thank you. And remember, if you enjoyed the episode, press subscribe on YouTube or in your podcast app, because that will show the algorithms that this is an important conversation, and then more people can learn about the importance of the Eating Disorder Foundation. Check the website, donate if you can, volunteer if you can, and I will see you at the next episode.